This is your Marijuana Cultivation Cannabis Podcast. We are so glad you are here. We need everyone ya. We need everyone ya. Today, we are diving deep into 3 critical topics every serious grower needs to master: defoliation, light stress training, and the art of timing your harvest to get the effects you want from your bud. This episode is packed tighter than a vacuum sealed bag of the dankest herb. So grab a notebook, light one up. Let's get our grow on. First, we are going to talk defoliation. You may have seen a million different ways to do it out there, and a million people being successful doing the million different ways. So it really goes to show you that a lot of defoliation, strategies are successful despite them maybe being a little bit off the beaten path. So we're going to explore some of that today, and you can decide what might work best for you. So what is defoliation? It's essentially like the practice of removing some of the leaves from your cannabis plants. And we're going to focus primarily on those large fan leaves. And so what's our goal of doing that? We're trying to improve light penetration, air circulation, helps that, everywhere on the plant, but especially in lower parts of the plant, getting blocked by the rest of the plant. So, by thinning out this canopy, we're allowing for that light to reach those bud sites that would, otherwise be sitting in the shadows and probably wouldn't develop fully. And with that better airflow, not only are we going to be getting the positives we already talked about, but we're going to reduce our likelihood of mold and mildew. Da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na. All right. So, defoliation, despite all the benefits of doing some of it, you got to walk that fine line between defoliating just enough to see the benefits and not going overboard. We are stressing the plants when we remove these leaves. And, your plant's like, whoa, I better protect myself. And they respond by producing more resin, which means more potent buds for you. So that's a good thing, of course. But on the flip side, if you go all Edward Scissors hands on the bit, you could slow down photosynthesis, which is how your plant converts light into the energy it needs to grow. No photosynthesis, no growth. Simple as that. Now let's talk about when should we be defoliating. Each school of thought kind of has its own pros and cons. So we'll talk about that here, and you can decide what will work best for you. So, some will do the early vegetative stage defoliation in the early vegetative stage, and right after the plant has just developed only a few sets of true leaves. And the idea here is kind of like to shape the plant early, and then you're able to more like direct its energy where you want it. And then, like as we talked about before, removing those leaves are allowing those lower parts of the plant to receive more light more quickly than they would have done if or would have gotten if you waited into a larger stage of growth to do your defoliation. So the caveat with this one is defoliating too early can stress young plants. Guilty! And more times than I can count because I just get so anxious to get growing. Or do something with my plants, I should say. I've gotten better about that. So just make sure they have a robust root system before we're doing any defoliation. For example, one time I was moving my plants from like 1 gallons to my final medium 3.9 auto pot plastic vases, 3.9 gallon auto pot plastic vases. And I started defoliating, within a few days, because had they just been in my final medium to start with, I would have started my defoliating at that point. But obviously, since I had just transplanted it to the auto pot system of all things, where it's going to be bottom feeding, that root system that I just had uprooted literally and smacked into a new home, it was not ready for it, and my plants really did get effed and slowed down my harvest time. I remember I had planted some autos at the same time, and I had harvested those autos before I was even done vegging the photos. So huge waste of resources for me on that one, all that electricity and time and money, when if I wouldn't have messed that up, I'd be harvesting at a normal time. Next, we have the mid-vegetative stage defoliation. So like a more conservative approach, right? Mid-vegetative stage, it's strong, it's growing rapidly. We know those roots are robust. So you're going to start by removing those larger fan leaves, blocking the lower parts, and we're going to get those benefits we've talked about already. And the idea behind this timing is the plant is going to recover quickly because it's growing vigorously, and actually it might trigger it to grow better in the long run due to that stress. It's, think of like when you go to the gym and you're doing the weights, when your muscles get broken down because you're exercising them, and then they grow back stronger, right? And then that's how we get our strength. That's how we improve our strength. Same kind of idea here. Other people will either wait until this time or do a combination of what we already talked about and doing it at this time. So another time that people do it is like right before flowering, basically pre-flowering, when we have those signs of pre-flowering. And those that do this a lot of times are going to be doing that lollipop method, where you're stripping away most of the lower leaves and branches that aren't going to be receiving much light during flowering. So the idea behind this is to direct the plant's energy toward the upper bud sites, obviously. And, I will say I haven't looked into this in a couple years, but if I remember correctly, a couple years ago, it seemed like that lollipopping idea had been kind of debunked. But maybe I'm misremembering. Email me at contactmccpod@gmail.com and let me know about that if you remember. That'd be cool to know. Because I've always wanted to do a lollipopping because it looks cool, but I just have always had it in the back of my head from hearing this one thing however long ago that it don't work out. Excuse me. So I haven't done it. Again, don't strip your leaves too much in this stage, even though the plant is huge and all that. We can still stress the plant past the point of it being beneficial. So just watch out for that. Just same principles for all these stages of defoliation. Not too many, just the ones blocking the spots that you want to get light to. And then you can also, which I didn't mention earlier, which I should have, is tuck. Tuck those big leaves behind so you don't have to cut them off and stress out the plant. You just tuck them away. That works for a couple, for a while before eventually you'll probably have to cut it off. But it's nice to let everything else grow around it without that stress. And, if we're doing it at this stage of flowering, we ain't going to recover from something if we mess it up. So be really careful. Be really careful at this stage. And I'm going to preach be careful on this stage again, because some people actually also do a late flowering stage defoliation. like week 6 or 7 of flower. There are some differing opinions, like everything on this subject. The leaves are all packed with nutrients, and it will reabsorb this as it's finishing flowering. So if you're removing these leaves like too late in the process, it can deprive your plant of these nutrients. And that can affect the development of your precious buds and that final potency. It definitely is a more advanced technique, and I would only do it if you're really confident in your plant's health and resilience. You know what I mean? And then this is more of what I do, the last of the school of thoughts, if you will, which is basically ongoing light defoliation. We just do a few leaves at a time throughout the entire growth cycle. It's less stressful on your plant. You're not shocking it with large amounts of chopping at once. And then you're just able to like gradually shape the plant how you want it. So if you're indoor and don't have a lot of space, which is me a lot of the time, it helps you shape that plant at all times, which is going to make it easier than trying to bend it to your will after it's developed its shape and size over time, right? So obviously, you know, there's no one size fits all answer as when you should do this. Experiment, err on the side of being careful and taking less. Schwazing I've heard of, where you're taking everything off. I've tried that, and all my leaves my plant got messed up big time from that, and took a long time to recover too. So just one guy's experience with schwazing, so I didn't even have it here because I can't really recommend it based on my own experience. So yeah, that's that. On to one of my favorite things about growing, light stress training. I really like, bending and playing with and finding the best way to how this branch fits there, this branch fits here. It's one of the most fun parts about growing for me, and I know that's not the case for everybody, but yeah. So we'll probably have to define what this is. So it's light stress training. You'll often hear people say it LST. And it's a technique where you gently bend and tie down the branches of your cannabis plants to create like even more canopy, and that canopy being even as well, hopefully. So we're trying to obviously get all our bud sites underneath that light and able to get maximum light. And kind of the beauty or the argument as to why people do this versus high stress training, which is a topic for another day, it's non-invasive. You're not cutting, you're not pruning, you're not putting the plant through any type of stress that might stun its growth. You're going to be safe. So how do we do it? We got to first identify the main stem and the largest branches of your plant. You're going to gently bend these down and away from the center of the plant to create a more horizontal structure. Use soft plant ties or garden wire to secure the branches in place, tying them down to the rim of your pot or to stakes if you're growing outdoors. The key here is to be gentle. Don't force the branches into position or you risk snapping them, something that I have done way too many times and way more than I'd like to admit. But if that does happen, email me and I'll teach you how to fix it, because it's not over when that happens. And we'll probably do an episode on it sometime, or at least part of an episode. So to get started, wait until your plant has at least several sets of true leaves and the branches are long enough to be bent without breaking. So this usually happens when the plant is in the early veg stage, but you can continue LST throughout the veg stage and even into the early flowering. So we're going to need to choose our tools to get this done. Soft plant ties or garden wire, even twist ties like from your bread, loaves of bread that you get. And some growers prefer using specialized like LST clips or hooks. I have, what are they called? They're yellow. I don't have it in the studio with me, obviously, but I can't remember the name of them, but I think they're like Bud Buddies or something like that. I don't know. Email me at contactmccpod@gmail.com. Those are great, especially if you're in a situation where you can't get down to that ground level. In order, like your leaves are so high that you're unable to stake at that point, or your medium is dry on the top because you're bottom feeding. I don't know how I can explain this just via audio. But it will bend without breaking your branches kind of midair. So if you have, one cola getting much too close to the light for where you want it at that point, and you're in the right stage, you can bend that ever so slightly with one of these bud clips, I think they're called now, which will bend that top over, but in a gentle way. And they say that the clip will actually break before you snap a branch. So I've never had a snap branch with them, so I can't attest to that, but that's what they say. So that's kind of cool. So then the top of your cola is now bent over, not only exposing more bud sites to light, which is great, but you're also then helping to control your grow so that as you go into flowering and the stretch, you're not getting too close to that top light without any more room to move. Okay? So we gotta identify that main stem, kind of like we've talked about, and the larger branches. And these are the ones that we're going to want to bend down and tie. Why? They're going to have the most to gain underneath them by the multiple bud sites that are likely developing. I don't know if that last sentence made perfect weed growing sense, but you get what I'm saying. So we're going to bend and secure. Gently bend the branches down and away, down and away, down and away from the center of the plant. Start with the main stem if it's still flexible enough, and then move on to the side branches. Secure the bent branches to the rim of your pot or to stakes placed in the soil. And when we secure the branches, we want to make sure that the ties are not too tight. They should hold the branch in place without cutting into the stem. And you can adjust the ties as the plant grows. Yeah, so if you have a twist tie around one of your branches, let's say, attached to a stake in the ground, if you don't loosen that up, that will dig in to the branch and cause issues. I've done it myself. So now I'm really careful about making the loop, maybe extra big so that it can grow into it, or checking it and adding a different one in the future, because if you miss that, your plant is just going to grow around the, whatever it is, zip tie or whatever you're using, and it's just going to be cutting itself as it's growing out, which can't be good for it. So we're doing this to train our plants to give us that even canopy, right? So as your plant continues to grow, you're going to have to adjust to continue to have that even canopy. Like when I first started growing, I'm like, oh, they're good now. Like I've shaped them in the shape I want. And then, you come back the next day and some huge cola has just shot up, overtaking everything else. And, I got another one I got to tie down or something like that. Another idea is you can top taller branches if it's growing faster than the others. So like if you have one that's shooting up, instead of trying to bend it down like we've talked about, we can top that and, make sure you know what you're doing with that. I'm sure we'll do an episode on that as well, but that's another way of keeping that canopy even. Now, there's a lot of controversy about topping autos. So just do a little research and decide if you want to do it or not with those. I've topped autos and I've not topped autos, and I've gotten basically the same results in terms of my final yield. So I don't think it hurts you, but I don't know if it helps you too much with the autos. That's just me. And then, obviously in the stretch and flowering, new bud sites form. You got to continue the LSD during the early flowering stage, but be gentle. Flowering plants are more delicate, and you don't want to cause unnecessary stress during that time. You know what I mean? It's shifting that energy to buds, so the stems become less flexible, and so you can't manipulate it easier as you can. Great sentence, Stephen. As easy as you could before. So when we're indoor growing, like a lot of us, LST is kind of the standard, I'd probably say. You're making use of your space, and you're ensuring that all parts of the plant get adequate light. And your grow lights are going to be more efficient because you have an even canopy. So you're saving money too, or at least your ROI is better when you're getting those bigger buds from the lower sites. And then there's something that maybe a lot of us didn't know, but LST does boost terpene production. So it's encouraging, the production of resin. And that's exactly where those precious terpenes are found. So you're not only getting more buds, but you're getting a tastier and, more aromatic experience. So it's a win-win. Another pro tip when you're doing LST, make sure to rotate your plants regularly. If you're turning them every few days, that will help ensure that all sides of the plant are getting equal exposure to light. So this will help your plant from, having those uneven spots. So that'll, keep it's a way to safeguard against your canopy being lopsided before it even has a chance to happen, right? Moving on. All right. Harvest timing. Oh my gosh. If you go on to any Reddit forum that has to do with weed, the vast majority of the posts have to do with, should I harvest? What do these trikes look like? Here's my plant with no trikes. Can you tell me when to harvest? No. I think this is by far the biggest topic talked about in the online, at least Reddit community. And the reason is there's this idea that when we harvest, our high experience is going to be different. If we do it a little bit earlier, and if we do it a little bit later, it actually will change the final product. So, we're putting all this time and effort into growing our plants, but say we harvest at the wrong time and we don't get the experience that we want from our harvest. That would suck. So the key to timing your harvest lies in the trichomes, okay? Don't send me pictures of your full plant asking me if it's ready to chop. I have no idea, because we need to magnify down into those trichomes, whether it's with a jeweler's loop, or if it is a electronic microscope. From experience, buy the cordless microscope on Amazon, where it connects to each other by Wi-Fi, I think, versus one with a cord connecting your microscope to your phone. So if you want to get one of those, make sure it's cordless. Okay? So we need, that loop or this microscope in order to see those trichomes and tell if they're clear, milky, or amber. We're not going to be able to tell with the naked eye. Make sure that when you're using these tools to find those trichomes on your buds, focus on the buds themselves rather than the sugar leaves. The sugar leaves trichomes will like mature faster than where the buds are, where it matters. And so it'll give you a misleading picture of where the plant is at in its life cycle. So check those trichomes, ideally in several different spots, and especially on the main colas where the biggest, most mature buds are developing. So what are we looking for once we got our trichomes in our sights, in our microscope? Clear trichomes. If we see clear trichomes, the cannabinoids inside are still developing. If you harvest at this stage, you'd get a more heady, energetic high. This is because the THC is still in its early stages of development, leading to a more cerebral, sometimes racy effect. Clear trichomes are ideal if you're looking for something that will keep you awake, creative, and focused. However, harvesting at this stage can also result in a less potent final product, as the THC hasn't fully matured. So if you put a picture of your trichomes up on Reddit and they're all clear and you ask, should I harvest? I will guarantee the resounding answer will be no. People usually want to wait longer than this for sure before harvesting. But again, to each their own. You get a different high from it. If you want that energetic head high, and try it. Do it on one solo grow plant where you harvest early and try it out for yourself. The other type of trichome, and next in the order, is milky. The trichomes actually turn milky when the TH content is at its peak. So then harvesting at this stage will give you a well-balanced high that's both uplifting and relaxing. So it's kind of like a perfect middle ground. And this is the sweet spot for many growers, especially if you're aiming for a strain that can be enjoyed at any time of the day without being too overpowering. Milky trichomes indicate that the cannabinoids are fully developed, offering the most potent experience your plant can deliver. And I would say yes, plus a few amber. I would say the majority of us are looking for milky plus a few amber. As soon as we see a couple amber, we're chopping. At least me and my buddies. Okay. And the last color we are looking for with these microscopes is looking for amber. So this is showing when the THC is actually beginning to degrade into CBN. And if you aren't familiar, it is known for its sedative effects. So harvesting at this stage will give you a more relaxed, couch-locking high. This is great if you're looking for a strain that'll help you wind down or relieve pain or get sleep. And these amber trichomes are also a sign that the plant is nearing the end of its life cycle. So if you're seeing mostly amber trichomes, it's time to chop. And like I mentioned before, most buds will have a mix of clear, milky, and amber trichomes at harvest time. It's not going to be as straightforward as I probably made it seem in that explanation. So the trick is just to aim for the balance that suits your needs. A mix of, mostly milky with some amber will give you a potent, relaxing high without being too sedative. And on the flip side, if you want a more energetic effect, aim for a mix of clear and milky trichomes. One thing I do want to note is that the strain you're growing does play a big role in how you want to approach your harvest time. For those indica dominant strains, they might benefit from a bit more time because if you're looking for that, indica couch feeling, more amber is going to give you that. And the sativa dominant strain, might be harvested when the trichomes are mostly milky for that, uplifting awake experience. And don't forget, the way you dry and cure your buds will also have a huge impact on the final effect. Proper curing can enhance the flavor, potency, and overall experience of your cannabis. So do not rush this process. Patience is key here too, just like so many other portions of growing, which sometimes makes me want to quit, but I won't. So we're looking to maximize those terpenes, okay? So keep your buds flavorful and aromatic. That's what we want. That gives us that taste. How do we do that? We dry it slowly, and then we cure it slowly in a cool, dark place, okay? I use grow bags for curing because they're like designed to maintain the perfect humidity levels without the need for burping, like with traditional jars. But whatever method you choose, just make sure you're doing it, because without it, your flavor is just going to suck. Like, I've left out buds before by accident that should have gone into the cure and dry process. And then I find them, 3 weeks later, glistening in trichomes. Just glistening. It looked like the nicest thing I've ever seen. No flavor, no smell. It was a big bummer. Okay. And talking about these terpenes, make sure that you're handling your plants carefully, okay? If you're trimming your buds while they're still wet, be gentle to avoid damaging those trichomes. The little resin glands there where the terpenes are stored, if they're rough handled, it can cause them to break off, and that'll reduce your potency and your aroma. So once you've trimmed and dried your buds, it's time to cure them. So curing is the process that involves storing your buds in airtight containers to allow the remaining moisture to evenly distribute throughout the bud. This not only improves the flavor and smoothness of your smoke, but also helps to preserve the terpenes and cannabinoids. I recommend curing your buds for at least 3 weeks before you try smoking it. But the longer you can wait, the better the final product will be. Some folks will cure their buds for several months. And they say that, and I say that it tastes better after more time, to a point. So, it's kind of an art as it is a science. You got to understand your plant, and you got to understand what you want from your plant. Okay? And experiment. I like to have a bunch of quarter gallon pots going in a small tent, and I'll put several different the same strain, but I'll harvest at several different points, and then I can do like an ABCD quickly with those smaller pots as to how it went. So don't be afraid to experiment. Donut. Let's see what we got news. So, from 10 hours ago, like every day during this news segment, I saw this headline and I thought, this is going to piss me off. Let's explore together. The Atlantic. Title: Marijuana is too strong now. A what? It can be whatever you want, buddy. There's 2%, 1% CBD strains. You're already losing me at the title, Malcolm Ferguson. Okay. Let's see what else this jabroni has to say. Strange thing has happened on the path to marijuana legalization. Users across all ages and experience levels are noticing that a drug that once turned into for fun and relaxation now triggers existential dread and paranoia. The density of the nugs is crazy. They're so sticky, a friend from college texted me recently. I soloed a joint from the dispensary recently and was tweaking just walking around. In 2022, the federal government reported that in samples seized by the Drug Enforcement Administration, average levels of THC had more than tripled compared with 25 years earlier, from 5 to 16%. Oh my gosh, 16%, guys? Did you hear that? Oof. I hope they handled that okay. That may understate how strong weed has gotten, you think? Walk into any dispensary in country, legal or not, and you'll be hard-pressed to find a single product advertising such a low THC level. Most strains claim to be at least 20 to 30% THC by weight. Concentrated weed products designed for vaping can be labeled as up to 90%. Now, as we all know, sidebar here from Steven, those percentages on your labels basically mean nothing. The testing labs want to give good results for repeat business. If you are a grower and you are aiming for high THC, are you going to go to the testing lab that gives you high THC bullshit results? Or are you going to go to a different one, to verify that the first one is right? No. You're going to get your certification from the one that certifies you at a higher THC than your shit really is. And regulators do not have their hands wrapped around this issue yet. So grow your own. Grow your own. I have to fly into the US soon for a conference, and it is an illegal state, luckily, and I will not be bringing my own, so I will be buying. So I'm going against myself in some scenarios, but if you can grow your own, smoke your own. Let's see if there's anything left in this article worth mentioning. The high that most adult weed smokers remember from their teenage years is most likely one produced by mids, as in middle tier weed. In the pre-legalization era, unless you had a connection with access to top shelf strains such as Purple Haze and Sour Diesel, we all had access to that. What the fuck? You probably had to settle for mids, or one step down. Reggie, as in regular weed. I've never heard that before, but whatever. Today, mids are hard to come by, he goes on to say. So why is this a bad thing? I'm still trying to find that here in this long-ass article that's way too wordy. I do like this last paragraph. He says, the history of drug enforcement in America was a long one of discriminatory, draconian enforcement. But the shift toward legal weed has tacked too far in the opposite direction. If marijuana is to be sold legally, consumers should know what they're buying and have confidence that someone is making sure it's safe. Bingo. Bingo. We do not know what those THC percentages mean. If we can agree as a society that getting high on weed shouldn't be illegal, we can also agree that smoking weed shouldn't involve disassociating at a house party or running into the middle of a snowstorm because you think imaginary bad guys are after you. I gotta think that last one didn't happen from just weed. Just my thought. And then he ends it with saying, I don't agree with this, but take it for what you will. He says the sad irony of legalization is that as weed has become easier to obtain, it has become harder to smoke. Dun-dun-dun. Something kind of cool that I came across yesterday night about my friends over there in the U.S. A U.S. court has ruled that marijuana users cannot be banned from gun ownership. So I've heard that was a hot topic over in the U.S. Guns are very important over there, and there are rules surrounding drug use and owning a gun or using a gun. Specifically owning a gun. If you're a drug user, you are not supposed to be in possession or own a gun. That's kind of the law. How that gets enforced is different. See Hunter Biden for some glimpse into how that works. And I'm not being political about that, just something in the news that you can look up in terms of how those different rules interact with each other, right? So on Wednesday, it was a court of appeal, ruled that a pot-smoking gun owner in Texas cannot be prosecuted for violating a federal ban on users of illegal drugs owning firearms, saying it is unconstitutional to disarm her based on her past drug habits. marijuana user or not, Paula is a member of our political community and thus has a presumptive right to bear arms. U.S. Circuit Judge Kurt Engelhardt, an appointee of the Republican former President Donald Trump, wrote for a 3-judge panel. He said that while the government may be allowed to bar some currently under the influence of drugs from having weapons, there is no historical justification for disarming a sober citizen not presently under an impairing influence. Interesting. I wonder if that'll help Hunter Biden in his case with that ruling. Cool. I'm not saying cool because I like him. I'm just saying, like, it's crazy witnessing history right in front of our eyes. And I'm a political science nerd. All right. I think that's enough news for one day. We'll be back at it tomorrow with more news. But until then, I hope you have a great evening. If you're getting out of town for Memorial Day over there in the U.S., I know my buddies get Monday off. Lucky bastards. I wish I was still there for that, at least for the 3-day weekend on this weekend. But oh well. Remember to email me at contactmccpod@gmail.com. Questions, concerns. Tell me what I fucked up. I am not the end all be all. I have not been doing this for as long as a lot of you folks, I'm sure, that are listening, and I'm constantly looking to grow, and I actually end up messing up my plans a lot of times because I'm always tinkering. It's kind of like my NFL fantasy football roster. I tinker it to death. Fun episode. Really glad you could join me. What the fuck was that? I think a bird just flew into the window. Whoa, that scared me. Anyway, where was I? Thanks for listening. We love to have you. We need every one of you on this little world of ours. So we're so glad you're here. Thanks to James A. Garfield Studios for being so accommodating every time we come in here. I don't have the puppy today, but we'll see him in a little bit when I get back to my spot I'm staying at. What else? I think that's it for announcements. And we are almost to where the ending music plays, so I don't have to edit it anymore. We'll just talk until we get there. All right, I'm just messing around, everyone. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you later. Bye. Testing.